Well, everyone, welcome. We're so happy that you're here today with us. Thank you for joining us. My name is Rafi Ferreira. I'm with Meta's Learning and Development team, and you have a treat. You are in for a treat today. First, I want to make sure to say that if you are here to learn how to build engaging customer experiences on WhatsApp with message templates and interactive messages, you are in the right place. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to Rashid Talukder. Rashid is a developer advocate at Meta who is going to be helping us today to better understand message templates and interactive messages. Rashid has years of experience building and sharing how to build interactions, integrations, and the power of conversation with community and collaboration platforms of different kinds. So let's explore his expertise, shall we? Rashid, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Rafi. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. Yeah, so having said these things, this introduction, I wanted to ask you a question before we jump into anything else, and I think this is important for our viewers. Rashid, can you give us an idea of what we will be learning today and how developers can use this for their business solutions?
Yeah, so first of all, let me just kind of state that this is going to be a pretty technical webinar, right? So we're going to technical video we're going to be going through, and what that means really is that this is obviously for a developer-centric audience, and we're actually going to be going through some examples of building a bi-directional communication and using a couple of features that are available on WhatsApp Business Platform, like we mentioned even in the title, message templates, interactive templates. Interactive messages, and we're going to be covering webhooks and things like that. Now, for example, if you are a social media / business exec, we're going to be recording this, just FYI, and it'll be posted on YouTube later on, and you'll get an email with it. So make sure to forward this video to your engineers or your product managers, where this might be really helpful and really relevant for them. And as far as what we're going to be covering today, the premise is that we want to ensure that you all are building really high quality messages, right? And having high quality conversations. And we're going to be exploring how to do that using some key features in WhatsApp Business Platform, such as the message templates and the interactive messages, right? And the message templates themselves, they let you build a really rich messaging experience that really can go beyond a simple text-based message. You could add media to those messages, such as images. You can add better formatting and personalization to those messages, which increases the relevance for your customers. And for us at Meta and at WhatsApp, it allows us to keep the overall users continuing to use this wonderful platform because it's got this review process for these message templates, so that we can continue to grow the number of people around the world that use it by continuing to make sure that these messages give them great value. And we've got over 2.4 billion customers using it a day. It'd be great to have even more people being able to access it that you can talk and have conversations with. So those are message templates in a nutshell. The other part are interactive messages. And interactive messages, my personal take, I guess, is that they help to provide a lot of great context of the options that are available in a message, so that, for example, you can attach your store catalog and be able to leverage additional APIs in the future, like payments APIs and stuff like that. And you could even build out a whole entire process using these integrations to actually have customers build out and place an order from within WhatsApp. We're not going to go into that here in this webinar because that's very advanced and it would take up quite a bit of time that we don't have time for. But this webinar is going to go through some of the basics of that, so you can get a good familiarity, right, before you really dive into some of that. And these interactive messages, they provide a standardization for what you can send customers in, for example, if you didn't have this standardization, you'd have to build pretty complicated chatbot models, right? And very complex application logic so that they can handle natural language processing. Whereas with interactive messages, they get standardized messages that you control from a self-selection of, list, let's say, how they respond and what they can pick, and that's really helpful. And finally, one of the big features as well that we're going to be covering is our webhooks, because this is a question that we get a lot, and it is fundamental to being able to receive the responses from the recipients. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're going to go through today. And then, of course, errors, right? We throughout the webinar. Yeah.
That's incredible. Well, that was pretty well elaborated. Thank you so much, Rashid. And it sounds like we're going to be talking about messaging and interactivity as it relates to customer experiences for different businesses. Mm-hmm. And I'm excited about it. I'm sure everyone is also excited about it. So why don't we go ahead and set up this walkthrough that we're going to be looking at today with you. We want to make sure we cover everything. So I did see a question in the Q&A in the beginning, and if English is perhaps your second language, you can use the closed captions function at the bottom of your screen. That's available for anyone to use. And I do want to say, please stick around after Rashid's walkthrough. We're going to be back to answer the questions that you submitted during the registration process. So if you're all ready, let's go ahead and get this walkthrough started.
In order for us to get started with this demonstration, let me set the stage. We have a fictitious e-commerce store, and we've got a backend service that essentially allows us to track and view and move the progress of a order along. So, for example, we can create a order process where a person has a couple items in their cart. They proceed to checkout. We process the payment. We start the shipping process, and then the item is delivered. And in order to have this application for us to talk about, we actually also provided, as a open source example within our FB samples account, in the GitHub repository, WhatsApp API examples. You can download this in GitHub by just cloning it onto your local machine if you want to follow along. And specifically, we're going to be using the example contained in the template for e-commerce.js folder. This walkthrough is going to assume that you're familiar with GitHub, you're familiar with REST APIs or Graph APIs, and it's going to move a little bit faster. So if you have any questions or if you need to, definitely try to view this again once we post it. But yeah, this is going to move along a little bit faster. So let's start by diving right in, and let's talk about something that you need to keep in mind before you even start building this application and running it. So in the previous webinar that Dimitri did, he touched on the difference between a temporary access token and a permanent access token. For our application specifically, you cannot use the temporary access token because it doesn't have the correct permission scopes to be able to make calls onto WhatsApp business management APIs. And the webhooks feature that we're going to need and use in this application makes it necessary for us to have a permanent token that's actually attached to a system user. So in order for you to do that, you need to go into your business settings, system users, and have a system user that has a access token that has the correct scopes necessary. So that includes anything related to WhatsApp messaging and also with WhatsApp business management as well, which was covered actually in the last webinar that Dimitri did. And you also want to make sure that you have the application that you're going to be using associated with this access token as well, because the app secret and everything else is actually an integral part of making this all work cohesively. So assuming that that's all done, let's go ahead and into our code editor. My IDE that I'm using here is Visual Studio Code. And we're going to go into the template for e-commerce JS folder, like I mentioned. And specifically, let's go ahead into this .env file that's in the root of this and take a look at what we have here. So we've got a couple of environmental variables being set here that should look familiar, like the app ID, app secret, the recipient phone number without the plus symbol, your phone number ID, and your business account ID. And then specifically, like I mentioned here, the system user access token, not the temporary one. And we have the API version number. In this case, we're just using version 15. And a prefix that we're going to be giving our message templates that we're going to be creating. And this can be really whatever. We're calling it marked because the fictitious store name is called marked. But the next point of interest here is this webhook verification token. And we need this in order to ensure that when we're configuring and setting up our webhooks, that the request that comes in is actually from a trusted party. In this case, it's going to be WhatsApp Business Platform. And so /Meta for the cloud hosted APIs. So for this, in this specific case, we have just a pretty simple verification string. I highly suggest you make it, more complex and within the, the limits of how big this can be. It's just because this is really, where security starts for your webhooks. And this ensures that you cannot configure a webhook without actually matching this verification token. So what WhatsApp will do is actually it'll send this token back, and as long as it matches, you can accept the process of setting up a webhook and validating it. So let's go ahead and copy that. I just copied that little token, and I'm going to set up a brand new webhook. And the way to do that is to go into your app dashboard for your application and WhatsApp, and then configuration. And you can then configure your webhook. So just press this edit button, and I'm going to paste that same verification token. Great, that part's done. Now I need a callback URL. That callback URL is, of course, going to be what is the endpoint that's going to where my little application is going to be running. And we talked about earlier, for me personally, I'm just going to use ngrok, which I have a URL that ngrok gives me here. And this URL forwards any traffic to it to localhost port 3000. And this web server actually is going to be running on port 3000, which is why we have it set up this way. And you need to make sure that this is allowed within your company's security policies. Luckily here at Meta, this is fine for our dev purposes. And I'm going to do one more thing to this callback URL. I don't want the webhooks to go to the root. I want it to actually go to the /incoming endpoint over here. And this is actually where I'll have a listener for my webhooks within my application for anything webhook related. And I'm going to click verify and save, and it's going to throw an error. And the error is because the token couldn't be validated. The reason why it can't be validated currently is because my little application is not running. So let's take a look at exactly what it means to verify. So I'm in the routes and incoming webhooks.js folder. And the way that I have it configured is that anything that goes to incoming, essentially those routes are handled by how we have this file set up. And so a GET request to /incoming, it'll look for query parameters that has a hub.mode set to subscribe and a hub.verify token to be equal to verify token, and verify token is set to the variable to the environmental variable that we have, which is within the .env file here. So it needs to match this, and if that matches, then we send a response of hub.challenge. Now, if you want to know more about the webhook and the challenge security feature, you can take a look at that right over here under our Graph API that has Graph API docs, which has information about the overall Graph API webhooks that we have set up. And so it talks about the different payloads that come in for the for the actual verification request. And so what the Graph API expects, it's a response of the challenge back to us. And that's exactly what our app does. So if I start up my application with npm start and I retry setting up the webhook again, by clicking verify and save again, I can see that the webhook was successfully verified and added. Now, this isn't enough actually to subscribe to anything. It just configures the actual callback URL. The next thing we need to do is actually subscribe to certain types of messages. In this case, we want to subscribe to or certain types of webhook events. And in this case, it's the messages events that we want to subscribe to. So I'm just going to click on version 15. I'm going to resubscribe, specifically version 15. I've got a success message here. So if I hit done, I now see webhook fields for messages. Great. The webhook is now successfully configured and should be working flawlessly here on out. All right. So now that we have the webhooks part of it done, let's go ahead, in terms of at least configuring it, let's go ahead and take a look at other security parts for webhooks. Because just because we have it configured and set up, and on WhatsApp side, we want to make sure that any messages that come in are actually legitimate messages. And the way that we do that actually is through a header called xhub signature, which you can see here. And it's a SHA-256 hash that's actually generated by taking the app secret as well as the payload and performing a algorithmic hashing of it. Everything needs to be lowercase. You could actually view most of that documentation on how that's done here in the Graph API docs for validating payloads. For this application specifically, we are actually going to be leveraging a library called ExpressX Hub, which we have set here for our node.js application. And in order for us to configure it, it's just line 19 within the app.js file, where we talk through essentially how the algorithm needs to be configured. And that's actually all that this takes in order for this to work. And it will generate a validating, verifiable signature that we can compare against to ensure that the messages are actually coming from WhatsApp, because the WhatsApp should be the only other entity that knows the app secret other than ourselves and our application. Okay, so that actually completes the webhook side of things, and the only other part really is that we also accept these post requests. We validate the xhub header, and then we process it, which runs through this other function called process message. And I'll touch into that later on as we talk about the interactive messages. So now we need to set up and create some message templates. So message templates is actually handled through this create templates.js file, which actually runs through this file called within public/javascripts called message templates.js. And within here, you can see an array called message templates that has a number of different templates within here. And essentially this application, once you try to create a template, it just runs through each of these items in the array, and it creates just a standard text-based message template. Now, message templates are really great because they help to ensure the quality of messages, because they can be much more engaging, much more centered to the interests of the actual specific user. Since these are all transactional messages as well, they fall under different limits for how many you can send, versus, for example, if they were under the marketing category. Now, because these are simple text-based ones, The text body is what accepts the arguments. So the payload, when we are configuring these message templates, for example, this one just takes a single parameter, basically their first names, and then it sends a sample message just kind of welcoming them. Similarly, we've got one for payment analysis, which takes 2. And so it's one for the first name and another one for the product that they're purchasing, so on and so forth. We specify the language. You could have a number of different languages that we support for international customers, and really kind of cater this to be very specific for your end user and provide that level of quality in terms of the messaging, so that you could ensure that you're having really great conversations and providing very highly engaging dialogue with your customers as well. If we wanted to, we could even have images as well as footers in these message templates to actually increase the richness of them. And I'll touch a little bit more on that when we look at a preview UI within the business platforms page. So with the application running, I'm going to go ahead and create these message templates by going to localhost :3000. And this is our actual little application that we have running. If I click on create message templates, it then creates these message templates, sends the requests, this payload that we have here, to the WhatsApp business platform. And you can see here that these message templates are already created because I've already done that. But if there's an error, for example, in the creation, you'd get a different error code, for example. So since these were already created, let me talk through some of the important parts of creating these webhooks. For these message templates. So in order for you to get here, to see your message templates, you need to go into your WhatsApp manager. So it'll be under all tools and then WhatsApp manager. And then you're going to go to account tools and then message templates. And we've got one loaded up here, but before I actually dive into it, let me actually show what this kind of looks like. So within here, we have all the different message templates. And something to really keep in mind here is that if you receive an error right after you create a message template where you are not able to use it, for example, it could be because the status is that it's actually pending or in review and not active. So until it gets marked active, you actually cannot use the message templates. So wait for that to pop up and change. If it's anything other than active, you won't even be able to test it, and you will get a 404 error, for example, saying that it's not found, even though you might see it within here. It's just that it's not accessible yet by the APIs. So let me just go into, let's say order in transit. This takes a text body of 1, 2, 3, 4 arguments, and we have a little sample preview here that takes, one of those example payloads that we saw earlier, and it shows, what it might look like for one of your customers. You could actually see a preview with images and footers as well as buttons and everything else as well. So this is really nice and handy for, being able to see what the message templates will look like before they actually get sent out. All right. And then you can view them for different languages, and so on and so forth. So that's that. So now that we have the message templates created here, let's take a look at this back office endpoint within our fictitious e-commerce app. And so we're essentially just behind the scenes and in a back office, and we can actually see the actual order status of some of our most recent orders that we have in this demo app. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to push this one order by Lorena along. She's got a couple of items in her cart right now, and I'm just going to pretend that this individual is going to check out. And let's see what happens both within WhatsApp and also within our application itself. So I click on checkout, and I've got a message that came in, and the order itself has moved on to payment analysis. So let's first look at what happened within our application here. We can see that we sent out a post. We sent out a request to WhatsApp Business Platform that gave us that essentially pushed a new message, which also had the payload that had the array that we needed. And then after that, we also got additional payloads coming from WhatsApp for the message updates that came in. So let's take a look at what it looks like within WhatsApp. So here we have the message. Hi, Lorena. Thank you for shopping with us. We received the order for the product oranges because that was what was the item that was being sent. And then there's also another message here that says that if I need to add any other items before the order is picked and packed, I can just message them. Awesome. We're able to, at the very least, have our application send messages now. And just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to click on approve and see what the new message is. Awesome. I even have a message with a link now. So you can see how engaging this can be for the end user and really uphold the quality that we want our conversations between businesses and end users to be. Very relevant, timely, and engaging. So I can go ahead and click through all of these, and it'll essentially use some of the different message templates that we have set up, and then show them for the user. But instead, what I want to do is I want to move on and demonstrate not just the message templates. And it also, by the way, if you want to learn more about the message templates, you could actually view some of the documentation here for different types of message templates that you can create. What's expected and what are the payloads supposed to look like, and reference the example that we've provided as a starting point. But in order for us to move on, I want to actually send a message to our application and try to actually add a new item to the order. So let me respond with, I want to add an item, and let's see what happens. So my 2 check marks have turned to blue, right? So my application is responding that it has read it. And the application responds to, do you want to add an item to your order? And this has the button replies. So I can have either a no or a yes, and I could actually have my application build logic around that. So let's say I click on yes. I can see here that it replies with yes. And now I get another message that tells me that here's a list, and this is a list message of all the different items that I can add to my order. So let's say I want to add broccoli, and I can send that over. And my application can essentially build this out and actually create a order process that's really engaging for my customer, where they're able to, add to an existing order with a relevant conversation where, hey, the item hasn't even been picked and packed yet, so you have time to add. So for my customer, there's value add. And then for me as the business, I'm able to get additional revenue by having additional items get sent to my customer that this person, Lorena, is choosing. So this is using the webhooks side of things. So let's take a look at that. So mentioned before about, it does the XHub signature validation, and then it calls this little sample function that we have here. It's really simplistic, where if the message type that it receives is a text message, it will reply back with a text message that we have set up, which is this over here, and it also provides this reply button message, which has the yes and no button, and it sends it to the recipient phone number. And I can view what this looks like by looking at the interactive messages.js, and we can see 2 different payloads here, one for the list message and the other for the reply button. And we can just see that we have two buttons here of type reply that has a title of no and a title of yes. And the thing that I want to call out here that's important to note is that the buttons themselves can have IDs. And let's say you've got, very similar logic, but you have different language presets, for example. Now you can actually reply without having different logic that you need to have for like different languages. Instead, you can just reference the ID itself, right? And so this makes it really powerful and easy for your applications when you're building them out to make them much more standardized, regardless of what language or other unique features and customizations that the user might have. So this simplifies the overall business logic build of your application. All right, so that was the reply button that got sent, and then this is the list message that was sent. And these two types of messages are the interactive messages that we have as an offer here. So if I go into interactive messages, I can see that there's really four types. There's single product messages, there's multi-product messages, the list messages, and then the reply button, like I mentioned. And we only use these two in this example for a very good reason. It's because the single product messages and the multi-product messages actually require you to have a store set up within your business with actual products and a catalog that WhatsApp Business Platform will actually pull in the data from and reference. It can provide an incredible engaging experience, but for the purpose of this demo, we didn't show that because we can't standardize, what products you might have and stuff like that. But it gives you an idea of really kind of what you can do and provides a good starting point, I think, for showing off these interactive messages. So essentially, that's interactive messages in a nutshell. One more thing that I want to call out as we dive into the errors part of this segment here and common errors. One thing that I want to point out is that there's actually some logic in here for that we did for the interactive messages, where we actually truncate in the list message section to a length of 10. The reason for this is because if you try to show more than 10 items in a list, it will actually throw an error back. And the error might not directly say anything related to you exceeding the number of items. So that's something to keep in mind when you're doing list messages, by the way, is that you can only send a list of size 10. So when you're thinking about, how you're going to display these types of information, you'll need to kind of think about like how to break it up into maximum list sizes of 10 and work through that listing flow. All right, so that's essentially just wraps up everything related to that I want to cover about interactive messages, about message templates, and setting up webhooks as well. Going into the error part of things, error messages for the Cloud API, they have a very unique way to be able to make it much easier for you to diagnose exactly what's going on. Now, we're all probably familiar with HTTP error codes. So, for example, 200 error code is a success, and then you've got 400s and 500s for server-related errors. And while those error codes, those status codes, are important and informational, it's not enough to be able to really help triage, what the issue might actually be. And so what I highly recommend when you're creating your application is that you essentially take anything that is a non-200 status response. And if it's not a 200, you should look at the error body that has the parameter code. And this code value will actually be much more insightful than really anything else. And there's actually even a message detail body within details of like exactly what the error might be in terms of like in like a human readable format. So a sample response for errors would look like this. Let's say this was a 400 something for rate limits, right? But if you want it to be much more specific, you can see the error code is 130429. And if you wanted to look it up in this table over here, you could look it up, or you can actually just see the details field that there are too many messages sent from this phone number in a short period of time. And you can actually build your logic around the actual error codes themselves, for how you want to handle certain types of error codes. This one might be you overall slow down your service and wait for some of the other messages to expire. For example, if you hit the rate limit for your day. So when it comes to error codes, absolutely take a look at the code response within the error response body. And then for human readability, check out the details. For your application, use the actual integer value that you get. And this will make actually building out your error handlers significantly easier. I think that covers all the different items that we wanted to cover today without going too far into it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rashid, for that walkthrough. That was incredible information. I know that I took a ton from it, and I'm sure everyone also learned a great deal. So I think this is the moment that you've been waiting for. Rashid, I think everybody's ready for this Q&A. Are we ready?
Yeah, totally ready.
Let's do this. So you all submitted some great questions, both during the registration process as well as via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen throughout this walkthrough. So we're going to go through some of these questions now. All right, so the first question that came up, and it seemed to be a good one, and we felt like we should bring it up, Rashid, is why can't I edit message templates? Why is that?
Yeah, so this is kind of a lowball question for me because the answer is you can now. It was a new feature that we launched very recently, I think about a week or two ago, where you can now actually not just create message templates. Before you had to delete and create a whole new one, or just create a new one and reference the new one by ID. Now you could actually edit existing message templates. So yay for that. Now, one thing I will say though is that when you edit a existing message template, it will actually throw it to another review cycle. So pay attention to that, because if your application, for example, is using an active message template and you edit it, it will not be accessible until it's been reviewed and marked as passed and accepted and is active again. So in that scenario, you want to continue to create a new one before you switch over and edit it and things like that. So yeah.
Excellent. So we can do them now. We just have to make sure we do it correctly. All right. So the following question that I think also, worthy of kind of taking a look into is, we were asked that we allow for text variables in the body, but do you allow for dynamic variables for images and or videos?
Yeah. So in this example, I specifically only showed text-based messages, and it was just for simplicity, because when you start adding media messages, then you have to do multiple requests, right? So I'd have to show uploading an image, and then getting that image URL back from the Graph API and then attaching that URL. But the answer to your question is yes, you can add images to your dynamically in the message templates. And essentially, there are a couple different sections within the message templates themselves. There's the header, there's the main body, and then there's the footer. And all three of those can actually accept a dynamic input. So the header can accept different images or just text. The body can accept different texts as well, and then the footer can also accept dynamic. So the answer is Yes, you can add images to your message within the header.
Wow, that's really cool. It's interesting to see the variation and the different abilities within each part. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. If you're ready for our third question, Rashid, this one is, it's basically asking about e-commerce. And so the question itself is, do you see future features such as e-commerce or transaction from within the WhatsApp business app?
Yeah, I don't just see it. We actually have that available. So you can actually, and that is like, the advanced use case. I called it out a little bit earlier, but essentially what that means is that what I mean by that is that you actually need to kind of have a store set up and a catalog that's linked, and you could attach it to like one of your ERP systems, for example, to feed the catalog into your store that's set up within like Facebook or Instagram or something, and then on top of that, you would need to reference those catalog ID numbers and product ID numbers within the catalog. But you could actually also attach that to the relatively new payments API that we have. And you could actually do a whole entire order for a user within WhatsApp. So for example, I can actually use the one of the interactive messages to be able to view a list of different items for within like a certain category, pick that item, and then I can actually check out and send payment all from within WhatsApp. There's quite a few different setups and steps within there. For payments, you have to set up your payment credential stuff so that you can actually accept payments into your accounts. And then you have to set up the catalog, like I mentioned. But all of this is doable. It's an entire workflow that we have. And we actually have some pretty big customers that are using all these features, and they do have an actual store presence where you can actually complete an entire checkout from start to finish all within WhatsApp.
Wow, that's an impressive bank of features and just the information itself. It sounds like not only are we moving forward, but we're creating things that make it easier, right, for the business owner or for persons looking for transactions to be completed within the app. That's incredible. Rashid, how do I add a chatbot to my integration?
Yeah, so this is a question we get a lot. And what I showed here today is essentially the workflow that you can modify, I'll say, to be able to add different chatbots. Like, for example, if you had a chat provider like Amazon Lex, or if you're using your own self-hosted one using open source frameworks like Rasa or something like that, you can actually use the webhooks feature, right? So instead of it just pointing to this like simple response model that we have, you could actually feed it into whatever chatbot that you have, run it through the NLP model that you have, and spit out the response, and whatever your application needs, you can actually build that out using the pattern that we showed here. So essentially, use the webhook, receive the webhook, route the webhook message, and transform whatever message you need to the chatbot, take the chatbot output, and then build whatever logic you need to send a response or whatever you need to do. So that would be how you would add a chatbot generally. In addition to that, since we do hear this question so often, I think it's worthwhile for us to kind of cover that topic maybe in a future webinar or in a blog post or something like that, because it's a good one. Yeah, but generally that's how you do it.
Yeah, no, that certainly would be interesting to look at it a little bit more in depth in a different time, in a different format perhaps, but definitely something that folks should keep an eye out for. And Rashid, you're on fire, so we're gonna go ahead and ask you one more question. How can I use WhatsApp to send media messages with Python code? How do I do that?
Yeah, so media messages with Python, I guess like it could be any message with Python. So I think I'll answer that question in two ways. The first way is going to be that we actually, in the GitHub repository that we showed, we actually have some examples that are in Python. We have examples in Python, Java, and JavaScript, because those are kind of some of the most popular languages, especially for people who use WhatsApp Business Platform. So we've got examples in Python. Now for media messages specifically, or I'm going to talk a little bit more generally. It's because this is a graph API, so it just takes regular HTTP requests. It's language agnostic, so it doesn't matter which language you happen to use. So if you're using Python or Java or Go or Rust, it's kind of irrelevant because you're just getting HTTP responses back. The webhook it sends a HTTP post notification, get for verification. So it's pretty standardized, so it doesn't matter what language you personally prefer. Which is great because it's, what you and your organization needs is exactly what you get to build using this. Yeah.
That's excellent. Yeah, that's excellent. Now, the next question that came up, and it seemed to be an interesting one, at least from my perspective, was how do I generate leads with WhatsApp platform?
So I guess the way that I would kind of start is at the top of the funnel, right? And so when I think about how can a user, recipient, a customer be able to opt in to being messaged, right? So you can actually send a message to a user. Let's say it's using one of the interactive messages, right, with the reply option, right? So if we use the reply one, we send a message that says, hey, would you like to opt into receiving XYZ? Yes, no. They click yes. You can now funnel them in as a potential, marketing lead who you could then progress down and qualify into the funnel depending on, what you actually need. You would definitely want to mark these messages not as anything like transactional. These are marketing messages. So showed in the payload there that most of the message templates that we created were transactional, but you would create message templates like anything that you sent afterward, after they responded with a yes to being further marketed to as a marketing message. And but that's the general pattern. And you can tie this to whatever CRM solution that you might have, or marketing automation solution that you might have, to kind of build out as you needed to be able to generate a lead funnel, right? To then be able to even close to a sale. So generally from a high level, that's how I'd approach it. Yeah.
Wow, Rashid, I mean, I knew you were a developer advocate, did not know you're also a marketing guru. This is incredible information. I hope you all are taking notes and or watch this later. All right, I think we have time for one more. So, Rashid, is SHA-256 considered secure enough?
That is a loaded question, but the answer is that it depends on what it's for, right? Security is always about trade-offs. Ideally this would be like RSA 2048 or something like that. But specifically, the SHA-256 call out is for the validation, the signature validation for the requests actually coming in from the webhook itself. And there's actually two different headers. First of all, there's a SHA-1 and a SHA-256 header that comes in with every single webhook request that you receive. The example we showed actually used the SHA-1, so we're actually working on increasing that to SHA-256. It's a library limitation on the one that we used, but I would say that for a lot of purposes, at least for just message validation, the security requirement versus the trade-off is kind of worth it. because it's not like you're encrypting the message itself, right? It's to validate the request. So for every single request, if, for example, we used a higher order algorithmic function, you would need exponentially more compute, right? And what that would do, the trade-off would be that you would increase your response time and increase your overall CPU budget, because you would need to use much more compute for every single request that you received. And if you wanted to have acceptable latencies, right, for the request processing time, you would essentially throw more money to the problem by having more CPU usage and throwing greater CPU power behind it in order to lower that. So it, for just the request validation, SHA-256 in present day would be considered good and okay. Meta is not and WhatsApp is not the only one that uses the XHub validation scheme using the SHA-256 algorithm. GitHub and some other ones use it too. But if we were actually encrypting the payload, no, that would not be enough. So really long-winded answer. I could kind of go on about it a little bit more for the day, but I think the answer is, for the purpose of validation, it's okay. But if it is for something else, which it's not, I would say no.
Excellent. Well, yeah, that was a loaded question. Thank you for taking that one on. And that was our last question for this session. I do want to thank everyone for coming today, joining us during this webinar. I do want to encourage you all to follow Rashid, his socials, follow him there, and we'll see you next time.
Like what you saw? And want to learn more about building great applications and integrations using WhatsApp Business Platform? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming videos.